The words hit like a hammer to my chest. "You'll leave with nothing," he spat, voice dripping with satisfaction. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the dining room table. Papers spread out between us like a battlefield. Financial statements, property deeds, bank records. All the evidence of our 15-year marriage reduced to documents that proved his control. The man I had loved, married, trusted stood across from me, smiling as if he'd won some cruel game. His arms were crossed. His posture relaxed. He looked so certain of his victory. "Nothing," he repeated, leaning forward. "You signed the prenup. You have no claim to the business. You walked away from your career. You have no income, no assets in your name. The house is mine. The cars are mine. Even your credit cards are under my account." His smirk grew wider. "So go ahead. File for divorce. See what happens. You'll be out on the street within a month." I stood there silent, my throat tight, my vision blurring at the edges. And just when his smirk reached its peak, just when he opened his mouth to deliver another blow, the door clicked open. My attorney stepped in, briefcase in hand, calm and unshakable. Everything was about to change. "My name is Olivia Harper, and I had always believed in loyalty. I thought marriage meant partnership, equality, trust. Two people building a life together, supporting each other through good times and bad. But behind closed doors I was invisible, erased in ways that no one else could see. He had spent years keeping me small, quiet, dependent. While the world thought we were perfect. To our friends we were the ideal couple. He was the successful businessman. I was the devoted wife who managed the home, attended his company events, smiled for photos at charity galas. No one saw the way he controlled every dollar I spent. The way he dismissed my opinions in private. The way he made every decision about our lives without asking what I wanted. I'd given up my job as a marketing coordinator when we married. He'd insisted. "Why work when I make enough for both of us?" he'd said. "Focus on making our home perfect." So I did. I became the perfect wife. Organized his schedule. Hosted his colleagues. Maintained his image. And slowly, year by year, I disappeared. My own bank account closed. My professional network faded. My independence eroded until I didn't recognize myself anymore. Until that morning 6 months ago when I found the first email. And everything I thought I knew began to unravel. I replayed that moment over and over. The laugh he gave when I first protested. The way he leaned back in his chair like he owned the room. "You're overreacting," he'd said, waving his hand dismissively. "It's just business." But it wasn't just business. It was our joint account, drained to fund his investment opportunity without my knowledge. $20,000. Gone. When I asked about it, he'd looked at me like I was stupid. "Since when do you understand finance?" "I'm handling it. That's my job." "But it's our money," I'd said quietly. "My money," he'd corrected. "You don't work, remember? Everything you spend comes from me." That's when I realized. I wasn't just betrayed. I was underestimated. Completely, thoroughly underestimated. He thought I was too dependent to question him. Too scared to challenge him. Too weak to do anything but accept whatever he decided. He thought I needed him. That I couldn't survive without him. That I had no options, no resources, no way out. He was wrong on every count. And that would be his first mistake. Because while he saw a helpless housewife, I saw myself clearly for the first time in years. I saw a woman who'd been strategic enough to build a successful career before marriage. Smart enough to notice patterns. Patient enough to wait for the right moment. I just needed to remember who I used to be. Late that night, after he'd gone to bed, I went to his office. The door was unlocked. He'd never thought to hide anything from me before. I found the emails on his laptop. He hadn't even logged out. Every secret account laid out in neat folders. Every hidden asset documented in spreadsheets. Every plan to control my future right there in black and white. There were emails to his lawyer about protecting assets in case of divorce. Messages to his accountant about moving funds to offshore accounts under my sole name. Discussions about the prenup and how it would ensure she can't touch anything. He'd been planning this for months. Maybe years. Building a financial fortress designed to keep me powerless. My blood boiled. Not with rage exactly. With purpose. Crystal clear purpose. I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything. Every email. Every document. Every account number. Every piece of evidence that would prove his deception. Knowledge was power. And I was about to become unstoppable. I worked for 2 hours systematically documenting his entire financial empire. When I finally closed the laptop and crept back to bed, my hands were steady. He never even stirred. Never suspected that his perfect, obedient wife had just gathered everything she needed to dismantle his carefully constructed lies. The next morning I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I smiled. Made him breakfast like always. Kissed him goodbye when he left for work. Then I called the number I'd found online the night before. Catherine Price, attorney at law. Specializing in complex divorce cases. I need help, I said when she answered. My voice was calm. Steady. My husband has been hiding assets and planning to leave me with nothing. But I have evidence. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. Every detail. Every document. Every pattern of control and manipulation I'd endured for 15 years. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Olivia, she finally said, what you've described is financial abuse. And what you've gathered is exactly what we need to fight back. Can we win? I asked. With this evidence? Absolutely. But it's going to take time and strategy. He can't know you're preparing until we're ready to move. I understand. Good. Because once we start this, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about his smirk. His certainty that I was powerless. His years of making me feel small. I'm sure, I whispered. And in that calm voice, I knew I had him cornered without him even realizing it yet. Every move from now on had to be precise. That Sunday, family gathered for dinner at our house. His parents, his sister, his brother and sister-in-law. All of them believing we were the perfect couple. He acted completely normal. Charming. Kind of. The devoted husband everyone thought he was. I watched, heart hammering beneath my calm exterior, as he bragged about his latest business deal. His newest investment. His expanding portfolio. Olivia takes such good care of me, he said at one point, reaching over to squeeze my hand. I couldn't do any of this without her support. His mother beamed. You two are so lucky to have each other. I smiled and nodded. Very lucky, I agreed. Every word he spoke, every smug glance he threw my way when no one was looking, I catalogued like ammunition. Mental notes stored for later use. His sister mentioned that I looked tired. Are you feeling okay? She asked with concern. Just a little under the weather, I said. Nothing serious. But I wasn't tired. I was hyper-aware. Watching. Listening. Bernie. I noticed how he downplayed my contributions. How he spoke over me when I started to talk. How he made decisions about our social calendar without asking my opinion, then presented them as if we'd discussed it together. Everyone saw what he wanted them to see. Nobody questioned the narrative he'd built. But I was done being part of his performance. Over the next month I began digging deeper. Going through joint accounts with a fine-tooth comb. Tracking every transaction. Uncovering years of hidden spending and debts he'd hoped I'd never notice. A gambling problem he'd hidden behind business lunches. Thousands spent at casinos, carefully disguised in his expense reports. Credit cards in his name only, maxed out and paid from our joint account without my knowledge. A second property I'd never heard of, purchased with money that should have been in our retirement fund. Each revelation fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about divorce anymore. This wasn't even just about getting what I was legally entitled to. This was about reclaiming everything that was mine. Everything he'd stolen through manipulation and control. Catherine helped me understand what each discovery meant legally. Document everything, she kept saying. Dates, amounts, sources. We need a complete picture. So I created spreadsheets. Organized files. Built a case brick by brick. At night after he fell asleep I worked quietly in the guest room. Piecing together the financial puzzle he'd thought was too complicated for me to understand. But I'd managed marketing budgets in my previous career. I understood numbers. I understood patterns. I'd just been told for so long that I'd started to believe it. Not anymore. Every hidden transaction I uncovered reminded me that I was capable, smart, and patient. 2 weeks later we attended one of his company events. A networking dinner with clients and colleagues. The kind of event where appearances mattered most. He was in his element. Working the room. shaking hands, telling jokes that made everyone laugh. I stood beside him, playing my role perfectly. The supportive wife. Smiling, nodding, staying quiet. Then one of his colleagues made a comment about a financial news story. Something about hidden assets in a divorce case. My husband jumped in immediately. "That's why you need a good prenup," he said loudly. "Protect yourself from gold diggers." He glanced at me with a smirk. Then, loud enough for the whole group to hear, he added, "Olivia couldn't manage a budget if her life depended on it. Good thing I handle all the finances." Laughter rippled through the group. Polite, uncomfortable laughter. I smiled. Inwardly I was shaking. Not with embarrassment. With fury. But I kept my expression pleasant. Took a sip of my wine. Said nothing. His colleague's wife looked at me with sympathy. I smiled at her too. Let her think I was too weak or too devoted to be offended. The world had yet to see the storm I was about to unleash. But it was coming. Building in intensity with every passing day. And he had no idea. After that night I started reaching out to old friends. People from my career before marriage. People he'd slowly alienated over the years with his possessive behavior. I'd tell them I was reconnecting, that I'd let too much time pass, that I wanted to catch up. Most were surprised to hear from me. Some were wary. But when I explained carefully and quietly that I was planning to leave my marriage, they opened up. "I never liked him," one former colleague admitted. "The way he controlled you. The way he spoke about you behind your back." "He talked about me?" I asked. "All the time. How you were difficult about money. How you didn't understand his business. How he had to manage you." Others confirmed similar stories. He'd been building a narrative for years. Positioning himself as the long-suffering husband dealing with an incompetent wife. They didn't just sympathize with me now. They provided insights. Confirmed patterns. Shared observations I'd never known about. One friend, a financial analyst, offered to review the documents I'd gathered. "Let me see if there's anything you missed," she said. She found 3 more hidden accounts within a week. Accounts even Catherine hadn't known to look for. My network was growing. Quiet allies positioning themselves to help when the moment came. Each one adding another piece to the puzzle I was building. Every interaction with him became calculated now. Every conversation a careful step in a larger strategy. I never raised my voice. Never gave him the satisfaction of seeing me panic or get emotional. I remained calm. Pleasant. The wife he expected me to be. But with every passing day the pressure on him grew. Invisible but inevitable. Catherine and I had weekly calls always scheduled when he was at work. We mapped out timelines. Discussed strategy. Prepared for different scenarios. "He's going to fight dirty," she warned. "Men like this always do. He'll try to intimidate you. Paint you as unstable. Question your credibility." "I know," I said. "Can you handle that?" "I've been handling it for 15 years. The difference now is I'm not alone." She smiled. "No, you're not." We filed preliminary paperwork. Nothing he'd see yet. Just the groundwork for what was coming. I opened a new bank account at a different bank. Started depositing small amounts of cash from grocery receipts he never looked at. Building an emergency fund he didn't know existed. I consulted with a therapist specializing in emotional abuse. Documented the psychological patterns in our relationship. Built evidence of his control that went beyond just financial. Every piece mattered. Every detail counted. And I was leaving nothing to chance. One evening I overheard him on the phone in his office. The door was cracked open. His voice confident. "Don't worry," he was saying. "The prenup is airtight. Even if she tries to leave, she'll get nothing. I made sure of it." Silence while the other person spoke. "No, she has no idea about the offshore accounts. She doesn't even look at the statements. I could be hiding millions and she wouldn't notice." More listening. Then he laughed. "She's too dependent. Too scared. She won't leave. She has nowhere to go." I stood in the hallway barely breathing. Recording every word on my phone. Not only was he planning to give me nothing, he was actively bragging about it. His blatant underestimation of me was almost funny now. I didn't react in the moment. Didn't storm in. Didn't confront him. I just saved the recording. Sent it to Catherine. Added it to the growing mountain of evidence. But the knowledge stoked a fire inside me I couldn't ignore. a determination that grew stronger every day. He thought he'd won before the game even started. He had no idea the game had already changed. And I was 10 moves ahead. I started reclaiming small victories. Things he wouldn't notice immediately. I transferred small amounts from our joint savings into my secret account. Never enough to trigger alerts. Just $50 here. 100 there. Building my escape fund. I secured copies of important documents. Our tax returns. Property deeds. His business records. Everything Catherine might need stored safely in a cloud account he couldn't access. I changed the passwords on my personal email and social media. Used two-factor authentication. Made sure he couldn't monitor my communications anymore. He noticed something shifting. I could tell by the way he looked at me sometimes. Suspicious. You've been quiet lately, he said one night. Just tired, I replied with a smile. You're not planning something stupid, are you? Like what? I don't know. Just seems like you're acting different. I'm the same as always, I said calmly. But I wasn't. And deep down I think he sensed it. His control was slipping in ways he couldn't quite identify. He thought he was still in control. Thought his walls were impenetrable. Thought I was too weak to climb over them. He wasn't. They weren't. And I already had. I just hadn't told him yet. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening. He'd had a bad day at work. Came home angry. Looking for someone to blame. He found me in the kitchen preparing dinner. We need to talk, he said. His tone made my stomach tighten. But I kept my voice steady. About what? Money's been moving from our savings account. Small amounts. But I noticed. My heart raced. But my hands stayed steady. I've been grocery shopping, I said. Costs have gone up. $50 for groceries? Weekly? That's not normal. Inflation, I said simply. He stepped closer. Eyes blazing. Trying to intimidate me with his physical presence. Don't lie to me, Olivia. Where is the money going? I looked him straight in the eye. Said nothing. My silence was louder than any argument. More unnerving than any defense. He expected me to scramble. To apologize. To explain and beg forgiveness. Instead I just held his gaze. Calm. Taken. For the first time in our marriage my silence had power. And it completely threw him off balance. We'll discuss this later, he finally muttered, backing away. But we both knew something had changed. For the first time he realized I was playing a different game. And he didn't know the rules anymore. A week later something unexpected happened. His brother called me. Olivia, can we talk? He asked. Privately. We met at a coffee shop across town. Somewhere my husband wouldn't see us. I know what's going on, his brother said quietly. The controlling behavior. The financial abuse. I've seen it for years. I was stunned. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because he's family. Because I didn't want to cause problems. Because I told myself it wasn't my business. He paused. I was wrong. He slid an envelope across the table. This is information about some accounts he thinks no one knows about. Including me. But I'm the one who helped him set them up 5 years ago. Before I understood what he was doing. Inside were account numbers. Bank names. Balances. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. Because what he's doing is wrong. And because I have a daughter. And if anyone ever treated her the way he treats you, I'd want someone to help her. An unexpected ally. A family member I'd thought was loyal to my husband, quietly slipping me information that would prove crucial. Proof of a secret he'd hoped would remain hidden forever. My plan accelerated. His own arrogance, his assumption that family would always protect him, had opened doors he didn't even know existed. Every move now had to be perfect. One wrong step and I could lose everything. Give him warning. Let him hide assets further. Destroy evidence. Catherine and I met in person for the first time. In her downtown office. Professional. Organized. Everything about her radiated competence. You've built an impressive case, she said, reviewing my files. Honestly, I've never seen anyone document abuse this thoroughly while still living with their abuser. It takes incredible strength. I didn't have a choice, I said. You did. You could have left with nothing and tried to rebuild. Instead you stayed and fought smart. That's courage. We mapped out his habits. His patterns. His weaknesses. The ways his arrogance made him predictable. He thinks he's smarter than everyone, I explained. Especially me. He won't expect sophisticated legal strategy because he doesn't think I'm capable of it. Then we'll use that, Catherine said. Let him underestimate you until the moment we strike. I became a strategist in my own life. Methodical. Unstoppable. Every document filed. Every timeline confirmed. Every piece of evidence verified and documented with precision. We prepared for his counterattacks. His attempts to paint me as unstable. His likely claims that I was the one hiding money or lying. But we had proof. Mountains of it. Irrefutable. Time-stamped. Some of it in his own words. The trap was almost ready. He began to notice more cracks. More subtle hints that something was wrong. You've been on your phone a lot, he said one evening. Texting an old friend, I replied. True enough. Which friend? From before we were married. We're reconnecting. His jaw tightened. He hated when I had relationships he couldn't monitor. I don't remember you mentioning that. You never asked about my day, I said simply. The truth of that statement hung between us. He couldn't argue because it was accurate. He'd never cared about my daily life unless it affected him. I kept my poker face. Let him doubt himself. Let him wonder what else he'd missed while assuming I was too predictable to surprise him. Every misstep on his part became another advantage. Every assumption he made gave me room to maneuver. He tried reasserting control in small ways. Questioning my purchases. Checking my location. Going through my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. But I'd anticipated all of it. My important communications were on a second phone he didn't know about. My real purchases hidden in cash transactions he couldn't track. I was always 3 steps ahead. And his growing paranoia was evidence that somewhere deep down he knew he was losing his grip. The first public crack came at a dinner party at his colleague's house. Casual conversation. Wine flowing. Someone mentioned a recent scandal at a local business. Embezzlement. The CEO's wife had uncovered it and reported him. Good for her, one woman said. My husband snorted. She probably didn't even understand what she found. Just got lucky and hired a good lawyer. Maybe she was smarter than her husband gave her credit for, I said quietly. The table went silent. I never contradicted him in public. He stared at me. What did you say? I said maybe he underestimated her. And that was his mistake. His face flushed red. But we had an audience. He couldn't explode the way he would have at home. Maybe, he said tightly. Later people were asking me questions. About my opinions. My thoughts on the scandal. As if they'd suddenly remembered I could think independently. Without warning, without my planning it, a carefully timed shift had occurred. One small moment of defiance that made people question the dynamic they'd always accepted. His friends and colleagues began to look at him differently. Questioning. Wondering. He was flustered. Unprepared. And for the first time vulnerable in the eyes of people whose respect he valued. The cracks were showing. 2 days later I was looking for a document in his office when I found something new. A folder labeled, Divorce Strategy. Inside were notes from his attorney. Plans for the divorce I hadn't even filed for yet. Discussions about how to minimize what I'd receive. Tactics for painting me as mentally unstable. Suggestions for hiding additional assets. He was so confident I'd eventually leave that he'd already planned his defense. Already prepared to destroy me in court. But what he didn't know was that I'd found it. And now Catherine and I could prepare counters to every strategy he'd planned to use. With my attorney we analyzed each tactic. Built responses. Gathered evidence that would make his planned arguments fall apart under scrutiny. He's going to claim you're financially irresponsible, Catherine said. So we'll show your successful career before marriage. Your organized documentation now. Your careful financial planning. He'll claim you're mentally unstable. So we'll have your therapist testify about the abuse patterns and your clarity of mind. He'll claim you contributed nothing to the marriage. So we'll document every sacrifice you made. Every professional opportunity you gave up. Every unpaid hour of labor maintaining his image. I uncovered his attempt to undermine me in legal documents he thought I hadn't read. But I'd read everything. Understood everything. And now we could turn his own strategy against him. The real turning point came from his own friend. Someone he'd known since college. Someone he trusted completely. The friend called me. I can't stay silent anymore, he said. He's been lying about you. To everyone. For years. He told me about conversations my husband had. Fabricated stories about me being difficult. Claims that I was emotionally unstable. Suggestions that I was the reason they didn't socialize more. He made you sound like a burden, the friend said. But I've seen how he treats you. And recently I started putting pieces together. The control. The isolation. The way he talks about you like your property. He provided emails. Text messages. Evidence of my husband's systematic campaign to undermine my reputation. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. As I'm getting divorced too. And my ex-wife told me some things about your husband. Things I didn't want to believe. But now I do. Someone my husband trusted had turned against him. Providing information I could use not just for asset division, but to counter his inevitable attacks on my character. Each new betrayal he faced, each blind spot I exploited, escalated the tension toward something inevitable. Something he still couldn't see coming. But I could. Clear as day. And I was ready. I sat in my living room on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, sipping tea, reflecting on the long game I'd been playing for 6 months. Every calculated move was in place. Every piece of evidence secured. Every ally positioned. Every domino lined up perfectly. Catherine had the court date. The papers were prepared. The strategy was finalized. We're ready, she told me that morning. Whenever you want to move forward, just say the word. This weekend, I'd replied. Give me until Monday. I needed one more weekend of normalcy. One more chance to be absolutely certain. One more moment to gather my courage for what was about to happen. Because once we started, there was no going back. Once those papers were served, my marriage was over. My life would change completely. But as I sat there, tea warm in my hands, I felt no doubt. Only clarity. Only certainty. He was at work. Probably planning his evening. Probably thinking about what to criticize when he got home. Probably still believing I was trapped. Somewhere in his office he had no idea what was coming. Had no idea that his perfect control had been an illusion for months. Had no idea that the wife he'd kept small was about to become the biggest threat to everything he'd built. The calm before the storm. And I was ready for the thunder. Monday morning. The attorney walked into the conference room where my husband and I sat. I told him we needed to discuss our finances. That I wanted to understand them better. He'd agreed, probably seeing it as another chance to patronize me. But when Catherine entered with her briefcase, his expression changed instantly. What is this? This is your wife's legal representation, Catherine said calmly. We're here to discuss the dissolution of your marriage. You can't be serious, he said looking at me. You're actually doing this? Yes, I said simply. Fine. You'll leave with nothing. Just like I told you. Actually, Catherine said, opening her briefcase, that's what we're here to discuss. She laid out documents. Every hidden account exposed. Every offshore fund documented. Every attempt to hide assets during marriage revealed in painful detail. His face went white. How did you? Your wife is much smarter than you gave her credit for, Catherine said. Every claim you've made about her financial incompetence is contradicted by these documents, which she found, organized, and documented herself. With timestamps. With account numbers. With your own emails as evidence. She pulled out more papers. The prenup you're relying on? It's voidable due to fraud. You hid significant assets during the marriage. You coerced her to sign under false pretenses about your financial situation. He tried to protest. That's not. We have emails, Catherine continued. To your attorney. Discussing how to protect assets from her. To your accountant about moving money offshore, before she notices. Each one proves you entered the prenup in bad faith. Each argument he tried to make collapsed under the weight of truth he'd never thought I'd discover. He realized his empire of control was slipping. I could see panic replacing arrogance in real time. You don't understand, he said to Catherine. She doesn't work. She has no income. She can't afford to fight this. Actually, Catherine replied, she has significant backing. People who believe in her case. Who've seen your behavior. Who are willing to support her financially through this process. That was partially true. My old friends had set up a fund. Small contributions from people who wanted to help. But more than that, Catherine was working partially on contingency. Confident we'd win enough to pay her fees from his assets. He turned to me. Eyes blazing. You planned this. You've been planning this for months. Yes, I said calmly. You manipulated me. Lied to me. I documented the truth. There's a difference. His attempts to intimidate me now backfired completely. Every aggressive question made him look worse. Every accusation revealed his own guilty conscience. Catherine had warned me he'd try to make me the villain. Paint me as the deceiver. Claim I'd been the one hiding things. But we had recordings. Timestamps. His own words proving he'd been the one manipulating. The one lying. The one planning to leave me with nothing. The psychological edge I'd gained over months of quiet preparation was undeniable. He'd lost before he even understood we were in battle. And everyone in that room could see it. Over the next 3 months, everything unraveled for him. Fast. Assets were frozen pending court review. His hidden accounts discovered by forensic accountants Catherine brought in. Every lie exposed. Every manipulation revealed. Friends and colleagues who'd believed his version of our marriage started questioning everything. His brother's testimony about the secret accounts was damning. His friend's evidence of the reputation-smearing campaign was worse. His own attorney seemed shocked by the evidence. Did you really think she wouldn't find out? I heard him ask during one hearing. My husband had no good answer. Just sputtered excuses that made him sound worse. The court appointed a mediator. Recommended therapy for him to address his controlling behaviors. Noted concerns about financial abuse in their initial findings. Every arrogant assumption he'd made came back to haunt him. Every sneer. Every, you'll leave with nothing. Every time he'd underestimated me. All of it crashed down on him like a wave he couldn't escape. I sat through hearings calmly. Answered questions clearly. Presented myself exactly as I was. Capable, organized, credible. While he grew increasingly erratic. Angry. Desperate. Showing the court exactly the kind of behavior I'd been describing all along. He finally understood he had lost. Not just the case. But his carefully constructed image. His reputation. The respect of people who mattered. Everything. The settlement came through on a gray Tuesday morning. Catherine called me with the news. You got the house, she said. Half of all marital assets including the offshore accounts. Spousal support for 3 years while you rebuild your career. And full disclosure of all his business assets going forward. I closed my eyes. We won. You won, she corrected. This was your work. Your preparation. Your courage. I reclaimed everything that had been mine. Assets I'd helped build. Respect I'd earned. Independence I'd sacrificed. But more importantly, I reclaimed my life. The woman I'd been before marriage. The confidence he'd tried to erase. The voice he'd tried to silence. The humiliation I'd endured for years. The fear I'd carried. The doubt he'd planted in my mind about my own capabilities. It all transformed into quiet triumph. I wasn't celebrating his loss. I was celebrating my freedom. My friends threw me a small party. Nothing elaborate. Just people who'd supported me. Who'd believed in me. Who'd helped me find my way back to myself. What will you do now? Someone asked. Everything, I said. Everything I've been putting off for 15 years. I enrolled in classes to update my professional skills. Reached out to my old industry contacts. Started rebuilding the career I'd abandoned. And for the first time in over a decade I felt like myself again. 6 months later I stood in my house. Mine now. Wiggly. Completely. I'd repainted the walls. Changed the furniture. Erased every trace of him and the life we'd had. The morning light came through windows I'd chosen. The space felt lighter. Cleaner. Walking away from that marriage I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of his control. The burden of his expectations. The constant effort of making myself smaller. All of it gone. I didn't need revenge to feel complete. The universe had delivered poetic justice. He'd faded into irrelevance. Lost his grip on everything he'd tried to control. While I thrived. Confident. Independent. Unstoppable. I got a new job offer. A marketing director position at a growing company. Better than what I'd left 15 years ago. They'd been impressed by my story. My determination. My strategic thinking. You orchestrated one of the most impressive cases of documenting abuse I've ever seen, the CEO said during my interview. That's the kind of strategic mind we need. I realized then that the ultimate victory wasn't just winning the settlement. It wasn't just getting assets or support or freedom. It was knowing my worth. Standing tall despite years of being told I was worthless. Moving forward without looking back. He tried to keep me small, dependent, powerless. Instead, he taught me exactly how strong I could be. How strategic. How unstoppable. And that lesson? That was mine to keep. Forever.